So the top 10 NBA teams of the 2000s. Number 10, the 2006 Heat, where Dwayne Wade went nuclear and Mark Cuban lost his mind. There's a lot of conversation about that finals, and was D. Wade fouled a million times? Could the Mavs keep him out of the paint? They definitely couldn't keep him out of the paint. When Wade did this, there was some talk of, is this the next MJ or whatever? Unfortunately, D. Wade had injuries, and Miami had some bad years after that, but for a brief moment, it was like, wait a minute. Did we just stumble upon the next top 10 all-time player? 35, 8, and 4. I mean, 35 points a game in the finals. That's just insanity. And I do remember, Jay Will, and at this point, Jason Williams was a little more disciplined, not as crazy with his passes. Antoine Walker, who just only shot threes, didn't play too hard on defense, and did weird dances with his shoulder when he was on the ground. Alonzo Mourning, potentially the best backup big guy ever. I mean, his block shots and just his steadiness on both sides of the floor were so good. Gary Payton was still good. Was James Posey playing like that? He might have been. I wonder if they ran any James Posey at power forward lineups with Shaq. They definitely would have if this team was playing today. It's interesting to think about this at number 10, though. I guess the idea would be that Shaq was a little worse. He was still very good, but, Dwayne Wade was definitely running the show. Number 9, the 2000 Lakers. So this is going to be interesting to see where all of the Kobe, Shaq Lakers end up, because this was the year in which they just squeaked it out against the Blazers, and then in the finals against the Pacers, if I remember right, it was a very close series. The Pacers lost, I think it was game 5 by 2 points. They lost game 6 by 5 points. The Lakers did not coast to the finals. The last 2 rounds were pretty challenging for them. So I guess that could be the way that you would knock down one of those teams a little bit. I have to assume the 16-1 team is number 1 on the list. So his only MVP season, Shaquille O'Neal. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I mean, was he robbed? Was he not playing hard enough? Whatever. I mean, in the finals, 38-17, 3-2. I mean, when we talk about Shaq being among the most unstoppable guys ever, it's in these scenarios like this. This did not happen for Shaq every game because it was impossible for him to do that. I mean, the guy would have been gassed by the halfway point of the regular season if he went like this all the time, And Kobe averaged 22 points, 6 boards, 5 assists. Yeah, Kobe was good. I don't think Kobe was amazing in the finals, though, from what I remember. But he certainly was great up to that point. Next, the 03 San Antonio Spurs. This team is interesting. I think it makes sense to have this team a little low. Although, they did beat the Lakers in 2003. And at that point, that was when Kobe and Shaq kind of had enough of each other. They still had one more season, of course, and we'll see the 04 Pistons, I assume, somewhere here. But I guess, are the 03 Spurs better than the 2000 Lakers? Maybe not. I mean, the 03 Spurs is a very interesting team where, as they say, they were led by a dominant Tim Duncan. I mean, Tony and Manu were young. I mean, Tony Parker was okay this year. He averaged 15 a game in the playoffs. This was David Robinson's last season, I believe. It was really, you could argue it was basically Tim Duncan and a bunch of guys, and Tim Duncan carried them all the way to a championship. And I feel like if you go through their playoff run, every series went 6 games, which I think kind of shows how not great of a team they were, but Tim Duncan was just so good that he got them over the hump anyway. And it also helped him that Kobe and Shaq and that whole thing was going, and Dirk was not healthy for that entire Mavericks series. I think that should be pointed out as well. But even so, it was a really impressive run. But I can understand why this team would be this low. Honestly, part of me thinks they should be number 10. But at the same time, Tim Duncan, he did beat the Lakers. That's impressive. Anyway, the 04 Pistons. All right, here we go. Yeah, this is a team where I think some would have them as low as number 10, others would have them a little higher. It's certainly a fun team to talk about, not necessarily to watch, because they didn't exactly score a lot of points. But, it's just the idea of 5 really good, two-way players, although in the case of Ben Wallace, kind of a one-way player, but amazing on that side of the floor. Combined with, what was it? Of course, Kobe and Shaq, at this point, reaching their boiling point. But still, the Pistons beat them. Interesting things about this whole thing is that they were pushed to a Game 7 by the Nets in round 2. There was a Richard Jefferson and Jason Kidd team, although the Pistons blew them out in Game 7 in Detroit. And then, of course, in that Pacers series, was that the infamous if you're a Pacers fan, Tayshaun block on Reggie Miller? I think so. They're a really fun team to talk about. Again, they're not a fun team to watch because they scored 70 points a game, but they're definitely a cool team to have in the NBA folklore or whatever. Number 6, the 05 Spurs. It's tough to differentiate some of these Spurs teams. This was the team that beat the Suns. Was this the Steve Nash hip check? Well, we can talk about it a little bit. So, when Nash, Stoudemire, Mary, and Joe Johnson, Quinn Richardson matched up with the Spurs, they were beaten handily. San Antonio slowed things down, held the Suns to 104 points per game in that series. Can I get a defensive rating? I don't really care about points per game, guys. Well, here we go. They scored 119 per 100. So we get a Spurs offensive rating, but we can't get a Spurs defensive rating? All right, cool. That's fine. The thing with the Suns team is they should have just went harder in the direction of like threes and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I bet you if you watch this now, for all the talk that we have about how the Suns did their whole thing, threes, small ball, it probably wasn't even that small compared to today. So they probably should have just went harder in that direction, and maybe that would have been the way to beat San Antonio. But even so, like, Tim Duncan was so good at defending anything, switching, covering in space and stuff. Well, I guess to be fair, he wasn't like Kevin Garnett when it came to switching, but Tim Duncan, he's so good defensively, I feel like he would have found a way to make an impact, even if you space the floor out like really hard. I should probably talk about the Pistons one. This is another reason why I think the 04 Pistons look good, is that they at least pushed the Spurs to a Game 7 the next year, The 02 Lakers. Was this when they robbed the Kings? I'm kidding. Kobe and Shaq combined to average 52 points, 16 rebounds, and 9 assists. Yeah, the Western Conference Finals between the Lakers and Kings are an NBA conspiracy theorists' playground. It's a really bad couple of minutes by the refs, the last 2 or 3 minutes of that fourth quarter. At least that's what mainly gets focused on. C. Webb, he probably gets hit on the hook shot that airballs. Ori flops on him, and it's not really a charge. C. Webb gets a pretty clean block on Kobe. Kobe elbows Mike Bibby. I don't tell you, man. It's not a great couple of minutes. Now, that being said, it is a little funny because one of the fouls on Divac, when he doesn't foul Shaq, but apparently fouls Shaq off the ball, Chris Webber does foul Robert Horry, and it's not called, so it's like a little funny there. Yeah, but this should be pointed out as well. The Kings had another shot to end the Lakers dynasty in Sacramento during Game 7. I mean, home teams are 1,000,006 in Game 7s. So, the 07 Spurs, yeah, this was, in some ways, this is kind of like the quintessential Spurs team, I guess, because Tim, Manu, and Tony are all at their best. It's unfortunate that, fortunate, I don't know. They met the Cavs in the finals. The Cavs had no chance. This was also the apex of Bruce Bowen, which means not only making his three-pointers and being one of the original 3-and-D guys. Shout out to Robert Horry, who's been in this a little bit. But also, I do appreciate that we have since looked back on Bruce Bowen and been like, yeah, he was kind of a jerk as a player, putting your leg under guys when they're shooting and things like that. I remember Michael Finley being really good in the early 2Ks. We're talking a long time ago at this point. Like, he didn't score that much for the Spurs, but he was awesome if you used him. Oh, this is the hip check one. Okay. Yeah. Boris Dio off the bench to defend their point guard. Yeah, I mean, it was dumb. They should not have been suspended. Maybe they should have been, and I don't remember it well. So, something interesting to think about is that the '08 Celtics are going to be one of the top 3 teams, and I think that team has become very interesting. But we'll just get to them when they pop up, I guess. The '09 Lakers. This was the best Kobe Pau team. Interestingly enough, they're ahead of several of the Kobe Shaq teams, which they do point out here. Better version of Kobe. Yeah, I mean, Kobe, if you want to point to an absolute peak of Kobe's career, it could be that 3-year stretch. Really, Kobe had like a 12-year peak or something, but if you really had to pick an isolated amount of time, it'd probably be those 3 years, because at that point it's like his athleticism was still there, his skills were all there, but his smarts and being a leader and all that stuff was the best it ever was. Yeah, I mean, Pau, Ariza, Odom, Bynum, Derek Fisher. I remember Trevor Ariza finding ways to score without ever being featured in the offense, and then he got signed somewhere else, and we all thought he was going to be a star because we were all dumb. And we realized, oh wait, this guy's just an off-ball player. Yeah, how good Odom and Ariza were during this era. Lamar Odom, I mean, you want to talk about an anomaly as a player. A 7-foot pass-first power forward who could switch across many positions, grab like 7-8 rebounds a game, could finish. I don't know if we appreciated just how unique of a player he was at the time. I know he got like 6th man of the year and he was beloved by Laker fans, but I feel like he was one of those guys who, if you did a top 50 players in the NBA thing, he might check out at like number 40, when in reality, he may have actually been like a top 20 player. He was that good, he was that versatile, and yeah. Bynum was cool too. The only thing I will say about the 2009 Lakers, and this is my Celtics fanness coming out, KG got hurt, man. Like, that, in a way, maybe that would have been the best finals if those two teams played each other 3 straight times. Because, I mean, you're talking about the Celtics, who were better in year 2 as opposed to the first year. It probably would have mirrored a lot of the last time they faced each other, you know? Game 7, it was, I don't think either team won 2 games in a row. Actually, that's not true. I think the Lakers won games 2 and 3 against. I mean, it probably would have mirrored the last time they played each other, you know, in 2010 with the series being back and forth, going to a game 7, all that stuff. Would have been cool. Didn't happen. There we go. 2008 Celtics, number 2. Yeah, I mean, like, I get it. KG's annoying. Paul Pierce is an idiot. People hate this team. I get it. But, in terms of, number 1, defense, 2, team chemistry, and whatever else, they've certainly got a case. I mean, the case against them is that they went to Game 7 against the frickin' Hawks in round 1. That's the case against them. Yeah, but thinking about that playoff run again for them, which, full context, the Hawks took them to a Game 7 somehow. LeBron almost beat them by himself. And then they beat the Pistons and the Lakers in 6 games. I don't know, man. I mean, the comeback against the Lakers in the finals, to me, was the awakening of that Celtics team. It was like they were so great in the regular season, and then for some reason it never totally clicked in the playoffs. And then it just all kind of happened when they came back from 1,000,000 points against the Lakers in LA. So, I don't know what all that means. Am I okay with them being number 2? I mean, well, just for the sake of whatever, let's just get this out of the way. Yeah, 2001 Lakers number 1, we get it. Everybody saw that coming. Okay, so who was better than the '08 Celtics? Were the '09 Lakers better than the '08 Celtics? I mean, it's impossible to really tell, but I kind of think they were. If anything, just because Kobe was so good in '09, you know what I mean? Which, in a way, is me saying that they would beat the Celtics the next year, and maybe they would have, but I also think the Celtics were better the next season before KG got hurt, so take that for what you will. Were the '07 Spurs better than the '08 Celtics? My gut feeling says no. As far as the 2002 Lakers are concerned, you know, I'll be honest, I kind of feel like they're the second best team of the decade still. I understand what happened in the Kings series, so maybe I'm losing my mind a little bit, but I just have a tough time believing anybody would beat these guys. But anyway, as for the 0-1 Lakers, yeah, this is the apex of two dominant players destroying everyone. And if you wanted to say that this is the best team ever, there's a conversation to be had, certainly. But there's a case. There's certainly a case.